This video shows the aftermath of a basement fire deliberately set by tenants who had stopped paying rent.
Fire started right here. It started burning out through these windows, up into the siding, and continuing up through the house. Down here was pretty much destroyed.
Kevin Costain says it took more than a year to repair the damage to his property in Oshawa, Ontario. It had spread to the entire house.
The tenant was put up in a hotel by the Red Cross, and then the son was arrested for arson. But still, even then, January 28th, I didn't get an eviction until August 15th.
Costain tried to kick his tenant out months before the fire because he wasn't paying his rent. It took 16 months to get an eviction order. By then, his tenant owed $26,000 in rent and had destroyed his house.
So until that point, when you finally got the eviction, he still had rights here as a tenant, even after setting fire to it?
That's right. He had what they call possession of the property. And so he would continue terrorizing me by sending emails, telling me how he wanted the house painted.
Terrorize you? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. The fire was shooting out almost like a torch out.
Costain's case is extreme, but he's not the only small landlord calling out bad tenants and the system that allows them to get away with it.
There's a lot of tension now between landlords and tenants. The system shouldn't put people in desperate situations.
And, like many others, he's fighting for change.
So I have a tenant who hasn't paid rent since March 2023. Today is March 2024.
Nazar Ajili's latest TikTok starts with the facts, moves to the shaming,
And he's abusing the system.
and wraps with a warning.
Do you know there are websites these days the landlord can use to report you to the credit bureau, bad tenants list? So you'll be very famous. Do you think anyone will rent you after that?
Ajili is a small landlord in Mississauga, Ontario, and he's on a public tear.
Be smart. Pay your rent.
When you made that video, what was going through your mind?
Frustration. Very, very tired of waiting. My mortgage payments almost doubled. My insurance increased by 30%. The bank will not wait for me to make the mortgage payments. I must make all my payments on time while I'm not getting paid my rent. We have no choice but to wait.
Ajili is a realtor and says many of his clients are in the same boat.
Unfortunately, there is nothing.
His tenant owes more than $14,000 in rent. Ajili applied for an eviction order at Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board last June, but his tenant hasn't budged.
This delay at the Landlord and Tenant Board has created what's called professional tenants. By the time the landlord files with the Landlord and Tenant Board and gets to the hearing date, they already lived there for over a year rent-free. Why? Because they know that they can get away with it. There are no consequences.
Ajili is hardly alone. More than half the cases before the Landlord and Tenant Board are from landlords for rent owing. The latest numbers aren't in yet, but between 2022 and 2023, there are more than 37,000 applications to evict tenants for non-payment of rent. The board says wait times are improving while it works through a backlog of more than 53,000 cases with the help of 75 new staff members, and says landlords who are trying to evict tenants who aren't paying their rent are now getting a hearing date within 4 months. But as we found out, a hearing date can often change.
Well, I got hundreds of comments on the video.
Ajili did get a hearing date last October, but it got postponed.
I got private messages from people offering help.
His recent post unleashed a lot of outrage and even some shady offers of help.
I would just wait for him outside until he opens the door, and then I'll change the lock and beat him up and take care of this for him.
Beat him up, wow.
Yeah. Look at this. We can just send our Uncle Tony to take care of this.
Who's Uncle Tony?
Probably he's just making a reference to a mafia guy or something. So we are at this point now. That's why I'm saying it's very scary.
Ajili says he won't resort to hiring any thugs, but he and many small landlords are taking matters into their own hands. Some are reporting non-paying tenants to credit bureaus, others creating bad tenant lists online. Thousands are also uploading eviction orders on a new website to publicize a tenant's track history. And tens of thousands have signed a petition to automatically evict non-paying tenants without a hearing. Driving it all, an increasingly public call to reform Ontario's judicial housing system.
Fix the empty
one that many small landlords say is breaking them financially and making the housing crisis even worse.
I'm exhausted all the time. I never realized what this level of chronic stress does to you.
This is the place?
This is the place. Yep. There's 2 units. There's the upstairs unit and the downstairs unit. So the downstairs unit is the one that's vacant right now.
Despite the demand out there, Lorinda Seward's duplex property in Peterborough, Ontario is half empty.
So this is the half that we're Airbnb-ing currently.
Her downstairs tenants, a family with young children, left last fall, scared off after the upper tenant was arrested for attacking a roommate with a tire iron. Police had been called upstairs nearly a dozen times before that.
And you've left this vacant because you just don't have the stomach for another tenant?
I don't have the stomach for another tenant, but also I don't feel it's right to have another tenant down here when we're not sure what's going on with the tenant upstairs.
That tenant, she says, had often been late with her rent, then after her arrest, stopped paying rent altogether. Seward applied for an eviction order 7 months ago.
She is holding my house hostage.
What's the worst part?
The worst part is I was a single mom for a lot of years, and I have 2 kids, one of whom has special needs. And I fought tooth and nail to hold on to this house. And I did it, and I might lose it. So I just have kept a running timeline of things.
With no rent coming in, Seward is borrowing money to pay the mortgage and other costs.
I updated it March 22nd. We have 3.5 months left of expenses in our line of credit.
And then what?
I don't know.
She's also making a relentless appeal to several politicians, the premier and the media, literally begging for help.
Why do you think it's important to put this story out publicly?
Because I want to really change the narrative about what a landlord looks like. I'm not a corporate landlord. I am a progressive leftist. I think that people should be housed. I think that I'm grateful to live in a country where we pay taxes so that people can be housed. I'd happily pay more taxes so that people can be housed. What I don't understand is why I, Lorinda personally, should be responsible to house people for free. We have the potential of losing our life savings.
The stakes are high for small landlords who rely on rent to help cover their costs. According to Statistics Canada, there are nearly 1 million multiple property owners in Ontario. The majority are homeowners with one investment property. Collectively, they provide more than 30% of housing in Ontario, but many of them are getting out of the long-term rental business, shrinking the housing supply even more. Costain just moved into his investment property rather than rent it out again.
So how many calls do you think you got this week, Booba, on the phone line?
He also connected with a growing advocacy group called Small Ownership Landlords of Ontario, or SOLO.
Basically they need support. We try to listen to them, make them understand they're not alone, and they can get some peer support.
SOLO says they hear from up to 30 landlords a month who are no longer renting their units long term.
We're motivated by how disjointed and dysfunctional the system is right now. There has to be changes. There has to be fairness in the system. There has to be an environment where a person can, rent out their place and give a person a chance. We have to make this fairer, better, and we have to change the incentives. There's too much incentive to do bad things right now.
That lack of faith recently drew landlords like Costain from across the province to a church basement in Peterborough.
We're at about 37,000 signatures, so it resonated.
Among them, Christopher Seepy, who started the petition to evict non-paying tenants without a hearing.
This was a near 2-year battle.
Wei Ting Bolu was also there. She created the website where eviction orders can be uploaded. She did it after her own tenants stopped paying rent.
And I got really angry and I said, this is not okay. It's now 3 months. These non-paying tenants are probably onto their next set of victims. I said, this is unacceptable.
My eviction day, part 1. In Ontario,
Bolu's own cautionary tale was the catalyst to many more. Since the website launched in January, more than 14,000 orders have been posted, most from small landlords.
It's about financial distress, mental distress, legal distress that you have to go through. This is the first time that small landlords are actually banding together, coming in solidarity. And to see everybody here, it's very empowering for each other and themselves.
When we come back,
the vast majority of tenants are law-abiding.
The impact on all renters.
So do you worry that that is going to make the shortage even worse?
Yes, we worry.
And Seward finally gets a hearing.
How can you listen to all that and not go, get out?
And worries about her family's future.
When we have a landlord-tenant board that is really the only sheriff in town that's not operating well, and people are really left to their own devices, it's a wild west out there.
Douglas Kwan is with Advocacy Centre for Tenants, Ontario.
The vast majority of tenants are law-abiding, they pay their rent on time. They want to make sure that their housing is secure, especially at a time like we have now, which is an affordable housing crisis. There hasn't been a substantial investment in purpose-built rentals that are affordable, and that's why we're relying on those small mom-and-pop landlords.
But these small mom-and-pop landlords are saying they want to get out of the rental business because of the delays at the board. So do you worry that that is going to make the shortage even worse?
Yes, we worry. We worry, and that's why we're advocating for change at the Landlord-Tenant Board to fix this crisis, both for landlords and tenants.
Kwan has joined forces with Solo, the landlord group, calling for reform of the Landlord and Tenant Board. Starting, he says, with resuming in-person services, pointing out that more staff is not the solution.
The huge backlog in the Landlord-Tenant Board and the access to justice challenges have really only started happening since the pandemic. For over 20 years prior to that, the Landlord-Tenant Board functioned fairly well, hearing 80,000 applications per year with up to 50 adjudicators. Right now, the Landlord-Tenant Board is trying to manage 80,000 applications with 153 adjudicators.
So something's not adding up.
It's not adding up because what tenants and landlords are finding is that moving to a virtual format is inefficient. It's not just delays, it's access to justice. And it only takes a stroke of a pen to reopen all of those offices.
How are you feeling?
I feel sick right now. Like, I feel sick. We did what we were supposed to do, and we could lose it all through nothing we did.
7 months after Seward turned to the board, she and her husband finally got a hearing. It took all day, punctuated by delays and an exhaustive review of the facts.
How can you listen to all that and not go, get out?
But her tenant made a case to the board to stay, promising to stick to a payment plan and to stay out of trouble with the law.
I don't understand how someone listens to this and still is entertaining a payment plan. How do you make an order not to be violent? I don't get it.
It could take up to a month before Seward finds out if she gets an eviction order.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming today. This is our third seminar.
As for Ajit, he finally got a hearing and an eviction order. It took nearly a year. During a recent client seminar, he spoke of investment risks.
Nobody was expecting the change in the mortgage rate.
Including the ones many landlords don't see coming.
We budgeted for all that, but nobody was budgeting for a tenant who doesn't pay rent.
Do you regret your investment now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was my biggest mistake. The moment I'll get my key, I'll list it for sale immediately, and I'll never do it again.
You'll never buy another property?
No, although I'm in the real estate business,
Yeah.
and this is my bread and butter, and I sell homes every day, I will never advise people to buy a house and rent it out in Ontario.
Costain is on the other side of his ordeal, but he also says he can't be a landlord again.
I should want to maybe do an upgrade and maybe turn this into 2 properties and have 2 rentals on the market. I should want to provide for the housing crisis because it's pretty bad, you know, but I can't. I can't bring myself to face that again. The thought of somebody else so perfectly willing to destroy my life would have the ability to do so is pretty scary.
So, Ioanna, this tension between landlords and tenants, you know, it's rising everywhere, but Ontario's numbers are clearly among the highest. And I wonder what the Landlord-Tenant Board is saying about all this.
Well, they're acknowledging that the wait times are not ideal and that they're working really hard to get through the backlog while also dealing with a 30% increase in cases. As for going and resuming in-person services, something that both sides are calling for, they're saying that they will remain digital first and that they do make exceptions when accommodations are warranted.
Okay, there's some logic in that when you think about it on paper, but what are the critics saying about that approach, the tenants in particular?
Well, Doug Kwan, who's in the story, talks about the fact that pre-pandemic, when things were in person, up to a third of the cases would be resolved in the hallway before people actually got into the hearing room, because they would sort it out face-to-face. Duty counsel would be around to help if they had any questions or even how to fill out a form properly. And we saw it firsthand when we were shooting exteriors of the LTV last week. Several people went up to the door and tried to go inside.
And they're locked.
And they're locked. And there's signs saying no in-person services. And one woman told us her first language is not English, and she said she was having a hard time figuring out the website and had come to ask somebody for help. And those are the kind of barriers that critics on both sides say only add to the delays.
Yeah, this matters. Ioanna, thanks for staying on this.
Thank you.